We're live. We made it. I'm Natalie. I do community relations for Walden Behavioral Care. I'm here today with Emily Slager, who is the program director for Walden's ambulatory clinic in Waltham. So we are excited to be here. Just a few quick things before we get into it. We're going to be doing these Facebook Live sessions probably for the rest of the year, so we're really excited to be doing that. It's going to be a lot of different topics, clinical topics, as well as kind of more informational type topics for alumni and for current patients, so that'll be fun too.
We'd love to make them useful and relevant for you guys, so please let us know. Feel free to send in some comments and let us know if there are topics that you'd be interested in, and we'll try to tailor our future sessions so that it makes sense for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And also, as we're going through our topic today, please feel free to comment, ask questions, clarifying questions, whatever works for you. We will do our best to reply to them live. If we don't get to them live, please still feel free to leave them, and we'll respond in the comment section after our session today. So we're going to talk a little bit about goals today. Actually, do you want to talk about Walden first?
Sure. So most of you probably know, but Walden Behavioral Care is kind of leading eating disorders resource in the New England area. We are the only full continuum of care for eating disorders in New England. So we have outpatient treatment all the way up to inpatient. Our hub is kind of in Waltham, but we do have 7 ambulatory clinics throughout Massachusetts and Connecticut, as well as a new inpatient unit in Connecticut as well. So we can kind of treat anybody and everybody regardless of what level of care you need, and try to branch out as much as we can and make ourselves available.
Yeah, and meet you where you're at as well.
Yeah.
So does it look like we have everyone coming in? Yeah? Okay. We're going to get started. Hopefully, if people are late starters, we'll try and fill you in a little bit. But today we're going to talk about goals, like I said. I've always not been a fan of the word resolution, just because I think maybe I'm biased being in the eating disorder field, but I feel like people are always resolving to change something about their external appearance, and I think that maybe isn't fair to themselves, and also maybe it's not fair to others. So I think there's a big difference between resolutions and goals, and I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So I think the big difference between resolutions is that they're finite. So, it's a closed amount of time, so maybe we'll feel more pressure to get it done by that point. Or if you say, it kind of encourages black and white thinking is how I view it.
Right.
Because if you don't get it done, then you're a failure. It's not like you're taking these steps towards a goal. Rather, you either made it or you didn't make it.
Right.
So.
And I think, we've talked about this a little bit, but I think the kind of calendarizing goals, right? It doesn't really make any sense why everybody, 50% of the population, would change all their behavior starting on January 1st. So I think, trying to give yourself a break and think about goal setting as just kind of a continuous process, and it doesn't have to be about eating disorder recovery, and it doesn't have to signify that something's wrong, but just, trying to think for yourself about what you kind of continuous improvement, right, and continuous change, and not putting a time box on it of starting January 1st, I'm going to do X or I'm going to do Y. We know that 77% of people who make New Year's resolutions keep that resolution for a week, and only 19% of people feel like they've been successful over 2 years. So
really?
A big drop off, yeah. And so I think in thinking about it that way, we want more than 19% of people to feel successful, right? So I think some of that is what we're going to be talking about, and not having it be a one New Year's resolution that may be more destined to fail, it sounds like.
Right, and why do we decide that on Monday I'm going to start doing XYZ? Why can't we then start Wednesday? What's the deal there? So I think also the last thing that I don't like about resolutions is that the word to resolve means to fix a problem or to fix something, which means maybe there isn't a problem to be fixed. Maybe it's just a suggestion that we want to do to better ourselves. So it's not necessarily that there's a problem to fix. It's just that there's something that
always
could
stuff we can
do
better, right?
Exactly. So I am going to jump right into our first. Oh, actually, don't talk about the SMART goals.
Sure, yeah. I think one thing, kind of way to think about this, and again, kind of distinguish between a lofty resolution that maybe, I think of it something more you would see on the cover of a magazine or something like that, right? We know that the number one New Year's resolution for years has been to lose weight. I think kind of across the board, that's how we operate.
Or to get like more fit.
Right. So to think more, if you can, a lot of you have probably heard of the notion of SMART goals. So instead of just saying, I'm going to do something better, to make sure that your goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So I think these are all characteristics of goals that make them certainly more worthwhile and feel valuable to you, and more likely to for you to be able to feel successful at it.
Right.
And again, I think the time-bound piece, thinking you may set goals that you accomplish by the end of the day, and that's great. But I think having a variety of things like that, so it's not I'm going to start this on January 1st, and if I don't do it, by January 10th, then I failed. But
right.
Just to kind of think about things as they come along. And keep those things in mind. So if anybody, if you look online, you'll find a lot of people talking about SMART goals, and some use slightly different wording for that, but the idea is all the same, to be more thoughtful about it, and not just kind of one blanket statement of something that you want to change.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we have 5 goals, like examples of goals, but they're more kind of like categories, and then Emily is going to kind of whittle that down into a SMART goal that would make sense for each of those categories,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll start with practicing self-compassion. So I have an example. I do better with anecdotes, so I'm going to give an example of something that I am thinking of. So the other day, I was sitting in my therapist's office, and this is a true story. I was really upset because I had just gone to the vet with my dog, and the vet told me that if I didn't start brushing my dog's teeth, then she's going to need surgery to like clean off the plaque. It's like a big thing. Yeah, so I was like, I feel like I'm a really bad mom, and also I just moved, so I was living in just like clutter, and I wanted to get to yoga, and I didn't, so I thought I was being lazy. And so my therapist was like, Natalie, like slow your roll. First of all, you're being really judgmental of yourself, and why don't you give yourself a break? Like, you have a lot of stuff going on. Like, you did give your dog a bath. Maybe you didn't brush your teeth, but you gave her a bath. You just moved, so it makes sense that you'd be tired and that you'd be living in clutter, and also that you wouldn't get a chance to go to yoga.
Sure.
You're not lazy. You're giving your body a well-deserved rest. So I think that's an example of practicing self-compassion. It's kind of like, instead of seeing the things that you didn't do, kind of see the things that you did do, and, congratulate yourself for doing that.
Right. And I think in general, we're much better at other compassion, right? Like, if you come and tell me those things, I didn't do X, Y, and Z, then it's easy for me to kind of respond in
Right.
the same way your therapist did, right?
Yeah.
And you would do the same thing for somebody else. But I think it's, we really beat ourselves up, and so I think trying to manage expectations and consider how you would respond to a friend or somebody else, and I think just being easier on yourself. So, most of us have expectations, and of course it's disappointing if those expectations aren't reached, but if it's something situational or an environment or somebody else, we're much more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of keep moving forward. So if something happens at work that's disappointing, you have an argument with a friend or partner, you're not likely to quit your job or end that relationship, right?
Because and that's kind of like the black and white
reach
thinking,
your expectations,
right?
Whereas if you set a kind of resolution type goal for yourself and you don't achieve it, then you're more likely to quit on yourself. So I think trying to have raise your expectations and lower them at the same time in some way, so that you're at least a little more balanced and give yourself a break. So, in terms of setting a SMART goal around self-compassion, it's not enough to say, I'm going to be nicer to myself in 2017.
What does that mean?
Right, so that's not really something you can act on.
Yeah.
So for something like this, it might even be that, I'm going to, every night before I go to bed, I'm going to write down 3 things that I'm proud of for the day, 3 things I feel like I accomplished, even if that's just, leaving the house in matching shoes, and getting to work on time. Things like that, but not to sell yourself short for doing things that may be hard for you.
Right. One that I love too is I remember being in a yoga class, and we were doing kind of like the beginning salutation type thing, and we were all just kind of sitting there, and she was like telling us to set an intention, and she was like, how about we all just take a second and thank ourselves for getting ourselves to the mat, because sometimes that's the hardest part.
Sure.
Sometimes the hardest part is getting there. So I loved that too.
Right.
Okay, so on to number 2. Introducing or reintroducing hobbies and passions. This one's huge for me, I think. I always am under the impression that balance is best. So like a lot of little things rather than a few big things is better for me, at least, I think. So an example of this is, so I was out doing a presentation with one of our clinicians, and she was giving an example of, she was talking about self-esteem and self-worth and like how we viewed ourselves, and she was relating that to like a pie chart. So she asked each of the students to think about their own pie chart and what parts of themselves would make up each piece of the puzzle.
Right.
So like, for example, some people would put like 50% of their self, according to them, is like student. And then 25% is a brother, 10% is an athlete, and however much more. So the example that she gave is like, well, if you view yourself as 50% student, what happens when you graduate?
Right.
Okay, so if you're 50% of your identity is a student and you graduate, how do you refill your pie back up and to make your life worthwhile and life worth living?
Right.
So.
And you know, we've talked about this. We've seen this a lot with our goals program for competitive athletes. So I think transition times are hard. So we see people leaving college and finishing their sport. So at the same time, you lose being a student and you lose being an athlete, which may comprise almost your whole identity for some of these people, right? So if all you've kind of known yourself as and been known as to other people for a decade is that you play basketball and you go to college, when those things go away, it's a kind of vulnerable time to kind of recreate that. So just trying to keep that in mind, cast a wide net. I think for all of us, it's better to be more balanced and have more things that make up our identities. Again, that kind of protects you a little bit and guards against disappointment. So I think thinking about that specifically in terms of hobbies and activities and that sort of thing, making sure that work isn't the only thing that you're spending your time and energy on, or just your sport, and I think often with our clients, the eating disorder takes up a huge piece of their pie, if you will, and so that's part of the struggle with thinking about recovery, is what's going to fill that void that may be left. So again, just like the first thing, you can't have a goal that's saying I'm going to get more involved in stuff, because that doesn't really tell you what you're going to do. So thinking about a friend of mine who played guitar a lot when she was younger and has kind of thrown it in the basement and it hasn't been seen in a decade, there are music stores all over the place around here that offer lessons, and so to get the guitar out and sign up for lessons, and then there's some accountability and a schedule and something like that that's bound to connect her to other people and be something that she feels good about and can kind of rebuild some confidence and an added dimension that hasn't been there for a long time.
Definitely. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3 is being assertive. So I obviously went to Google to find the definition for this. So I found emotionally honest, direct, self-enhancing, and expressive. So this assertive person would feel confident at the time of the action and then after. So they wouldn't feel guilt or shame after doing it either, so that's a big piece as well. So I think being assertive in what you want professionally and what you want personally, and sometimes being assertive is such a little thing as saying like, that doesn't make me feel good to like a friend, like that actually isn't helping my overall health, so maybe could you not do that? Or like maybe sharing that much with me is putting a lot of extra stress on me, so like can I be a friend to you in other ways? So, and I mean, so little things like that can even be assertive. You don't have to like be like, I need a $20,000 raise or anything like that. Right.
Although we'd like a $20,000 raise.
I mean, yeah.
But I think being assertive can help you be able to say no to things and get your needs met without being taken advantage of. So I think this comes up in treatment a lot, and certainly coming into treatment is a huge sacrifice and impacts all these other areas of everybody's lives. I was talking to a woman this week about how to she needs to come back into treatment, she thinks, but how to have a conversation with her boss about leaving work again, and I was kind of encouraging her to pay attention to why she was making the decisions she was making, so why aren't you in treatment? Well, I feel badly if I leave work and then other people have more of a burden. I feel badly so I tried to encourage her to in thinking with herself when I'm not there, if the first argument is I feel badly, then that's probably not the right argument, right? So trying to think about, how to be able to take care of yourself, how to put yourself first, doesn't come naturally to a lot of us, and make sure that we're not taken advantage of. And I think this can be obviously it's what we need to do for our own health and well-being, and it's a hard thing to do. So, you know, I need to be in treatment right now, so what does that mean? That means I need to work less. It means I need to talk to my supervisor about this, you know, to make sure that you get what you need rather than perpetuating a negative cycle otherwise.
Right, because at the end of the day, if you're not doing your best work because you're sick or there's other reasons that you can't do it well, then you're, again, hurting them in the long run anyways.
Right.
So it's also a self-compassion thing, I think, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so number 4, developing or reconnecting to your tribe. So I love that word. It's like all over Facebook now, or like your squad. So I think that's a huge treatment goal for a lot of our patients. I think eating disorders are a really isolating kind of shame-inducing illness. So I think the easy thing to do is kind of like retreat and like go into your bubble, and so you don't have to explain why you're doing certain things, and you don't have to have other people worrying about you. I think it's really easy for us to do that, even if you don't have an eating disorder. So I think it's important for us to connect to other people. It helps us with accountability. It helps us with I think humans are just social beings. Like it's not necessarily natural for us to not be around people. And I think that's a huge piece of treatment, right? Right.
And I think even those of us who are depressed or who are more introverted or whatever the case may be, I think we all still need people, right? So I think trying to, like Natalie said, having some accountability, having some, you know, building confidence, having these connections. If you think about the last time you laughed really hard, even if it was a little while ago, you probably weren't by yourself, right? You're probably with somebody else. Or watching a great movie. But more often than not, I think when we think about our happiest memories and our best times, it's probably not alone.
Right. Very true.
And so just thinking about that and kind of what you need, even if the pull is to kind of retreat and be more isolated. We also know with eating disorders that the eating disorder thrives in a more isolated situation, right? So haven't seen a lot of people really recover totally on their own without some support. But have seen a lot of eating disorders really thrive, again, when people are really isolated.
Yeah. So what can a good, smart goal be for that?
Sure. So, you know, being less isolated isn't really a good goal, right? Yeah. So, you know, something my family did when I was younger to help keep all these kids in different families connected is have a standing Wednesday night dinner date. So this has been a 20-year tradition in my hometown and my family, but, you know, several families, and, you know, we're all going to different schools and things like that, but, you know, trying to carve out space and a set time, you know, to be able to get together and have time. So I think all of us have people that we've lost touch with, and, you know, let's make plans, but I think actually putting something on the calendar regularly can be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and finally, this kind of like goes into it a little bit, is seeking help from a professional. So, I mean, we obviously see it in our field as a professional, as someone who can help us with our mental health issues, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It can be a therapist, or it could be a doctor, it could be a masseuse, it could be, I don't know, an astrologist, if that's something you're into.
Sure.
So I think that is a really important piece. You know, I think there's a lot of stigma in mental health especially, and I think that we're not doing ourselves any favors by keeping things quiet. You know, it's not a weak thing to seek help. It's actually, I think, kind of brave because there is such a stigma, and also it's kind of making sure that it's accepting that you can't do everything yourself.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and I think we accept that in a lot of other areas, right? Like, I don't expect that I should be able to repair my car if it breaks down. And, you know, if my daughter breaks her leg, I don't think I'll just take care of that at home and not ask for anybody's help, right? So I think...
and it would be weird if you tried to do it yourself.
It would be weird. And probably very unsuccessful, right? So I think, you know, trying to keep that in mind and really... set goals for yourself based on experiences you've had in the past. What's worked, what hasn't, what have you never tried before? You know, how can you shake things up and do something that may challenge you and may be a little bit different, but could ultimately, you know, be the difference maker in trying to get you over the hump.
Totally. So that kind of concludes our portion of this. We'd be happy to take any questions that we might have. Again, we understand if it's kind of, you know, you can't think of anything. If you think of anything after, please feel free to comment. Please feel free to also share your own goals with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And we'd be happy to kind of respond to those as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us for our first round here. And again, give us some feedback about what you'd like to see going forward. We'd be happy to hear it.
Definitely. Take care.